Welcome to Truth in the Dark. Here, we bring you real cases based on verified and credible sources. So, no more waiting, let's dive into the story. In 2001, Scott Ponder launched a motorcycle and powersports dealership in South Carolina, naming it Superbike Motorsports. The business flourished, allowing him to bring on his close friend Brian Lucas as the service manager. Everything appeared to be going splendidly for Scott. Business was thriving. It became a gathering spot for fellow motorbike aficionados, and he enjoyed a happy marriage. To a woman named Melissa Ponder Brackman, in 2003, the couple was anticipating their first child together. On November 6, 2003, Noel Lee, a regular at the Superbike Motorsports dealership, called ahead to check if they were too busy for him to stop by. He was informed they weren't, and he arrived at the shop about 10 minutes after his call. Upon entering, he discovered both Scott and Brian lying in a pool of blood in the shop's parking lot. Lee initially thought it was a gruesome prank, as the guys had seemed fine just moments before. Earlier, he urged them to rise, even nudging Brian with his foot, but when neither reacted, he understood it was no joke. Lee dashed into the shop to call 911, but inside, he was met with more horror. Scott's mother, Beverly Guy, who often lent a hand at the shop, lay lifeless on the floor near the bathroom. Further in, he stumbled upon the recently hired mechanic, Chris Sherbert, slumped over a bike he had been working on. All four individuals at the shop had been shot and killed. When the police arrived, they were baffled by the scene. In a four-person murder scene, the most straightforward explanation might suggest a robbery gone awry. However, nothing was stolen, and cash was left out in the open. As the investigation commenced, a lead emerged almost immediately. The last individual to see the four victims alive was a customer at the shop, just moments before the tragic event. This customer reported seeing a man in the dealership asking about a motorcycle and noted that he spoke as if he were unfamiliar with bikes. Yet, investigators struggled to uncover the identity of this individual. The attention of the authorities, it raised numerous questions. The police had initially focused their investigation on Melissa, Scott's widow, who had been questioned multiple times, even shortly after giving birth to their son, Scott Jr. During one of her visits to the station, she discreetly changed her baby's diaper, unaware that the police had taken the discarded diaper from the trash. They conducted a DNA test, and the outcome was astonishing. The baby's DNA did not correspond with Scott's, but rather matched that of his best friend, Brian. This unexpected revelation sent shockwaves through the investigation. Melissa's focus was unwavering as she firmly rejected the findings and insisted on a second test. When the results mirrored the first, confirming that the baby's DNA aligned with Brian's and not Scott's, Melissa fell silent, refusing to engage with the police any longer. This silence only deepened their suspicions about her involvement. For nearly a year and a half, she remained under scrutiny, with law enforcement monitoring her actions closely, yet no concrete evidence linked her to the case. Eventually, the investigators opted to examine Beverly and Brian's DNA, though their reasoning remained undisclosed. They discovered that Beverly's DNA did not match her son's, which led the police to realize that Scott's and Brian's DNA samples had been confused. Melissa was exonerated. Her son was indeed Scott's, and she was no longer under suspicion. In 2004, the sheriff's office enlisted the help of former FBI agent and esteemed serial killer profiler John Douglas. However, for more than 10 years, the police faced challenges in uncovering any additional leads. Despite hundreds of individuals being questioned throughout the years, the Superbike murders remained a cold case. It wasn't until another seemingly an unrelated crime unfolded, leading to a revelation in 2016, 13 years after the Superbike murders. Kayla Brown and her boyfriend, Charles David Carver, vanished while intending to clean a property for a real estate agent. Their families feared the worst, yet they continued to receive Facebook messages. These messages suggested that the couple had married, purchased a home, and were content, requesting to be left in peace. However, the oddity lay in their silence towards their families, which raised suspicions. Their unease grew as they traced the couple's last known location through phone pings, leading police to a sprawling 95-acre property owned by a real estate agent named Todd Colehap. With a criminal history as a registered offender, Kohlhepp had spent 15 years in prison since 1987 for assault and kidnapping. Upon investigating the property, authorities stumbled upon a scene reminiscent of a grisly horror film. They discovered Kayla, held captive and chained like an animal in a metal shipping container, where she had been forced to live. For over 2 months, she was held in a container, but fortunately, she emerged mostly unscathed, albeit visibly shaken. Upon her rescue, Kayla recounted the harrowing events that unfolded when Kohlhepp and Charles had a heated argument, culminating in Kohlhepp drawing a gun and shooting him. Charles David Carver was discovered lifeless on the property, his shirt marked by 3 bullet holes, each a grim testament to the violence he endured. As the police combed through Kohlhepp's land, they stumbled upon another chilling revelation. The remains of Johnny Coxey and Megan McCraw Coxey were also unearthed. The couple had been missing since 2015, and in an even more unsettling twist, the feet were absent from the bodies, including Carver's. Kohlhepp insisted he had no knowledge of why the feet were missing, even remarking, "My mother told me never to play with my food." Investigators noted that the feet hadn't been chewed off by animals and appeared to have been removed in a manner that raised suspicions. Personally, I find it hard to conceive of any non-suspicious method for removing feet. Once in custody, Kohlhepp faced interrogation, and during the interview, he confessed to having taken more lives than the 3 bodies that the police were aware of. He recounted an incident from 2003 when he had gone to a bike shop. At the shop, he informed the employees that his motorbike had been stolen and expressed his intention to purchase another. During his visit, he felt he was subjected to ridicule, as one employee seemed to suggest they had a hand in the theft of his first bike. He recounted returning several times, only to face further mockery. Ultimately, he resolved to seek his own form of retribution. He lingered until the shop was empty before entering and taking the lives of 4 individuals inside. Kohlhepp was the individual accountable for the superbike murders. It's particularly unsettling to reflect on the fact that prior to Kohlhepp's discovery, law enforcement received a compilation of 400 superbike customers, assembled by a private investigator engaged by Brian's family. This list pinpointed 15 names, including Kohlhepp's, due to his criminal history. It is suspected that the list was never thoroughly examined. Perhaps had it been, different outcomes might have emerged. If only Kohlhepp had been stopped sooner, countless lives could have been spared. An intriguing theory has emerged since his arrest, suggesting that he may not have been responsible for the superbike murders at all. Instead, he might have claimed responsibility to enhance his image as a serial killer. When recounting the events of that fateful day in 2003, he stated that he shot all 4 victims in the forehead. However, none of them bore gunshot wounds in that area. Additionally, he misidentified the type of bullets used and got the details wrong regarding the locations of Scott and Brian's deaths. In several interviews, he outright denied any involvement in the killings. Investigators attributed these inconsistencies to the passage of time, suggesting that after 13 years, details could easily become muddled. However, they remained confident in his connection to the 4 deaths. Todd Kohlhepp is now serving life sentences for the murder of 7 individuals. Do you believe he is culpable? Back in the late 1960s, the List family seemed to embody the American dream, with John List serving as a bank vice president alongside his wife, Helen, his mother, and their 3 children. In a grand mansion nestled in Westfield, New Jersey, a family of children resided within its 19 rooms, complete with a ballroom and elegant marble fireplaces. To the outside world, they seemed to possess everything one could desire. Yet beneath the surface, their reality was starkly different. In 1971, John faced the loss of his job, a blow that left him grappling with the challenge of finding new employment. Rather than confiding in his family about his struggles, he felt an overwhelming sense of shame. Each day, he would rise as if heading to work, but instead, he found himself at the train station, where he spent hours lost in the pages of newspapers and drifting into naps, concealing the truth of his situation. However, he found himself without an income and unable to cover his bills. Rather than resorting to welfare, which would expose his difficulties to the entire community, he began to covertly withdraw money from his mother's bank account to maintain his mortgage payments. Yet, this scheme was unsustainable. When the bank issued a foreclosure threat, John understood that his deceptions were on the verge of being unveiled. Faced with this reality, he concluded that he had only one option left. John List was determined to vanish. To initiate his meticulous plan, he made his way to the post office, where he paused to. After collecting the family's mail, he headed to the bank to cash in his mother's savings bonds. Once back home, he made several calls to those who could check on them, informing them that the rest of the family had already departed for North Carolina to visit his wife's mother. He mentioned his intention to follow them soon, ensuring that no one would search for them. John then took scissors and meticulously cut himself out of every picture in his house, making it more challenging for anyone to trace him. Following this, he made his way to John F. Kennedy. At the International Airport in New York, instead of boarding a plane, he left his car as a deceptive clue and took a bus into the city. John List had vanished, having told others that his family would be away for some time. No one found it strange that the List family was absent. It wasn't until a month later that the police arrived at the List mansion. Inside, they discovered the family, or at least most of them, lying on the ballroom floor. The bodies of John's wife and 3 children were there, all shot. Upstairs, more victims had also been shot. John's mother was found dead, and a confession letter was discovered at the scene, addressed to John's pastor. John List hadn't escaped from his family. He had murdered them all and then vanished. But where had he gone? There were no signs of him, just a car left at the airport, after which his trail went cold and remained so for years. The List murders were frequently revisited, but it wasn't until 1989, 18 years later, that the case was highlighted on America's Most Wanted, featuring a picture of John List created by a forensic sculptor. A group of neighbors in Denver recognized a man on television, but it wasn't John List. It was someone they knew as Robert P. Clark. Realizing that Clark and List were the same person, they promptly contacted the police. 11 days later, John List was apprehended after having fled the crime scene at his home in 1971. He had assumed the identity of Robert P. Clark and managed to live unnoticed in Denver, initially working as a fry cook in a hotel before later becoming an accountant for H&R Block. In 1985, John remarried a widow named Dolores Clark, and they relocated to Richmond, Virginia. In court, all of John's crimes were revealed. On November 9, 1971, after the 3 kids left for school, John stood behind his wife and shot her while she sipped her morning coffee. He then went upstairs to find his 84-year-old mother, who was having breakfast, kissed her, and shot her in the head. He used an old 9mm pistol he had purchased as a World War II souvenir and a .22 caliber target pistol. Following his meticulous strategy, John moved his wife's body into the ballroom and tidied up the blood to avoid alarming his children upon their return. While he waited, he made calls to create the illusion that the family was out. In a display of chilling indifference, John paused his cleanup to prepare a sandwich. As his kids arrived home, he methodically took the lives of each one, starting with 16-year-old Patricia, known as Patty, followed by his youngest, 13-year-old Frederick. John then seemingly went to support his 15-year-old son, John Jr., at his high school. At the school soccer game, he drove him home, but the night took a dark turn as he dragged all the bodies into the ballroom, leaving his mother upstairs. Disturbingly, John spent the night in the house with the bodies. The next day, he left the lights on, turned on music, and made his great escape. His second wife had actually watched an episode of America's Most Wanted featuring him, yet she failed to connect the dots. John's warped rationale for the horrific act was that it was the only way to save them and ensure their passage to a better place. In 1990, John List faced a guilty verdict and received a sentence of 5 life terms. He expressed remorse for what he termed the tragedy of 1971, yet he failed to mention his wife, mother, or children. At the age of 82, John passed away in prison in 2008. On October 31, 1992, Candace Funaki arrived at a hospital in Kipling, Canada, not in search of medical assistance, but rather to find her friend for a conversation after a significant argument with her boyfriend. Although her friend was not on duty, Candace's agitation from the fight was palpable. The nurse recommended that she consult one of the doctors, and Dr. John Schneeberger was available to see her. He suggested that taking a sedative would likely help calm her nerves, and she concurred with his assessment. However, instead of receiving a pill as she anticipated, Schneeberger administered an injection. The sensation was not what she had envisioned. Rather than merely feeling calmer, she experienced a profound and immediate numbness. Fonagi's recollection following the injection was hazy, but when she finally regained her clarity, she was certain that something dreadful had transpired. What transpired was a harrowing experience for her. She firmly believed that while she was unconscious, Schneeberger had assaulted her. Without hesitation, she went directly to the police to report the unsettling incident and provided samples. The police discovered traces of semen in her underwear and pants, along with evidence of the drug administered by the doctor. Upon further examination, the substance injected by Schneeberger was identified as the potent anesthetic Versed, also known as midazolam, which induces drowsiness and reduces anxiety, but also impedes the formation of new memories. Memories are often associated with specific moments, particularly in medical contexts. This substance is typically administered prior to medical procedures or for individuals reliant on mechanical ventilation, as it diminishes awareness. It is not commonly prescribed for situations like Bonague's, making Schneeberger's decision to administer it peculiar. It appeared that Bonague's suspicions were valid, suggesting that the doctor had taken advantage of her vulnerability. When the police confronted Schneeberger regarding the accusations, he willingly offered a blood sample for comparison with the evidence they possessed. Collected from Faunus, his DNA didn't match the first sample Schneeberger had provided to the police, which wasn't taken under police supervision. However, a second sample was obtained a year later under police watch, and this sample also didn't match. Schneeberger offered an explanation for Fonagi's allegations, stating that the drug he administered was occasionally known to induce hallucinations of sexual activity, which could clarify why she was convinced something had occurred while she was unconscious. Until the second sample was taken, the community had supported Vonage, but now, many were convinced she was fabricating the entire story, as there was no evidence of any misconduct. The police ceased their inquiries, yet Vonage refused to relent. She enlisted a private investigator to obtain a sample of Schneeberger's DNA, intending to have it analyzed at a private lab. However, as one might expect, acquiring a blood sample is no simple task. Most individuals are quite aware when they are bleeding and tend to be cautious of anyone approaching them with a needle. The private investigator opted for a more accessible target, Schneeberger's chapstick. His DNA from the chapstick was tested, and it matched the DNA sample from the semen found on Fonagy. With this evidence, Fonagy initiated a civil trial against Schneeberger. However, for the trial to be successful, Schneeberger's DNA had to be collected again in front of witnesses to ensure its admissibility. Schneeberger consented, but when the technician attempted to draw blood from his finger, he insisted on providing a sample from his arm. Despite the vein being visible, the technician faced difficulties in extracting blood, and the resulting sample was inadequate. There was sufficient DNA available for testing, leading to the case against Fonagy being dismissed once more. For years, Fonagy fought to have her case reconsidered, but her claims fell on deaf ears. It wasn't until 1997 that the tide began to turn when Schneeberger's wife, Lisa, approached the police with serious allegations. She accused him of injecting his 15-year-old stepdaughter with a drug at night and subsequently assaulting her. Following these allegations, law enforcement adopted a more rigorous approach, obtaining not just a blood sample from Schneeberger, but a more comprehensive collection this time. And they also took some of his hair. The DNA results were baffling. Schneeberger's DNA was the perfect match for the semen sample found on Fonagy years earlier. But how was it possible that none of the other blood samples matched until now? He was arrested, but the sinister truth wasn't revealed until trial. In 1999, Schneeberger admitted that he had been evading giving the police a true blood sample by slicing open his arm and implanting a 15-centimeter Penrose drain directly into his arm. He filled the drain with blood he had. A patient provided a sample when police collected from his arm, directing them to the tube for extracting another man's blood. He had even included anticoagulants to prevent significant degradation. However, by the third blood sample, over 2 years had passed, and he was nearly out of blood, which made it difficult for the technician to obtain a usable sample. Despite this, Schneeberger continued to deny any assault on Fonagy, asserting that the semen sample discovered on her had been taken from him. claiming she had extracted it from a used source. Condom, no one purchased this narrative, and Schneeberger faced conviction for obstruction of justice due to the peculiar blood tube in his arm, receiving a 6-year prison sentence in May 2010. The family of 26-year-old Army veteran Sam became increasingly anxious when he failed to return home for the weekend. They attempted to reach him on his phone, but he did not respond. As their worry intensified, his parents opted to visit his apartment in Costa Mesa, California, where they encountered an unimaginable horror within. Lying face on Sam's bed lay a lifeless woman, her pants torn and bunched around her ankles, suggesting a violent encounter. A bullet wound marred her head, and a tiara adorned her hair, while the words "all yours" were scrawled across her back. Sam's family had unwittingly discovered a horrific crime scene, yet Sam was nowhere to be found in the apartment. Concern gnawed at them, fearing he might also be injured and in hiding. When the police arrived, they did not initiate a search for Sam as a missing person, much to his family's dismay. As a person of interest in the death of the woman found in his apartment, the young woman was identified as 23-year-old Julie Jury Kabushi, a college student and dancer. Sam's family was aware of her, as he had mentioned to his father that Jury was his friend and like a sister to him. Despite this, the police were convinced that Sam had killed Jury, as all evidence indicated he was the only other person present in his apartment at the time of her death. They initiated a massive manhunt for Sam, believing he was a fugitive on the run. The first lead emerged when they examined his ATM records revealed that he continued to withdraw money, but when they apprehended the individual taking out Sam's funds, they discovered a 16-year-old with his ATM card not Sam. The teenager confessed that he had been asked to withdraw the money for someone else, but again, it wasn't Sam. It was a young man named Daniel Wozniak. Daniel, a community theater actor, lived next door to Sam in the apartment complex, and the two had been friends initially. Police suspect that Daniel was assisting Sam, helping to funnel him money while he was evading capture. Yet, there remained no trace of Sam, whom they needed to interrogate regarding the dubious ATM withdrawals. Daniel found himself arrested while celebrating at his bachelor party in Huntington Beach. During the questioning, he claimed to have witnessed Sam departing his apartment alongside an unknown individual clad in a black hat. However, after enduring hours of denial, he ultimately abandoned the charade. Daniel confessed to having murdered Jury and revealed to the police the location where they could locate Sam, hoping to aid the investigators. They would discover him alive, but it all came to a tragic end when Sam's severed head was found discarded in the bushes at the El Dorado Nature Center in Long Beach. He had been shot twice in the head. Daniel soon confessed to killing Sam as well. He recounted how he had asked Sam for assistance in moving furniture in the attic of a theater where he frequently participated in community productions. While they were moving the furniture, Daniel shot and killed him, stealing his ATM card, wallet, and cell phone to cover his tracks. To further conceal the crime, Daniel dismembered Sam's body using a hatchet and saw. But what had driven him to commit such an act? And why take the Jury's lives as well? At the time of the murders, Daniel found himself without a steady job, lacking funds, and facing imminent eviction from his apartment. He had recently been arrested at his bachelor party, and with his wedding approaching, desperation for money to cover the expenses of the ceremony and honeymoon was mounting. Unbeknownst to him, Sam had casually mentioned that he had saved $62,000 from his combat pay during his service in Afghanistan. It seemed Daniel's intentions were to take advantage of Sam's savings, funds from his bank account to finance his honeymoon. As heartbreaking as Sam's death was, the jury found themselves entangled in Daniel's nefarious scheme. In a chilling twist, Daniel exploited Sam's phone to entice her to his apartment, leveraging their friendship as classmates. The jury arrived after receiving a message from Sam, claiming he was dealing with family issues and needed a girl's shoulder to lean on. Upon her arrival, Daniel shot her and manipulated the scene to make it appear as though she had been assaulted. In a calculated move to conceal his misdeeds, Sam was framed. In 2016, Daniel Wozniak faced conviction on 2 counts of first-degree murder, resulting in a death sentence that remains unfulfilled. On January 2, 2000, 18-year-old Zeb Quinn departed from his job at Walmart in Asheville, North Carolina, with plans to meet a friend. This friend, Robert Jason Owens, was to accompany him to inspect a vehicle that Quinn was keen on purchasing. They convened at a gas station around 9 p.m., with Owens driving his Ford pickup truck ahead. As Quinn's light blue Mazda Protege trailed behind, they approached T.C. Roberson High School on Long Shoals Road. Quinn flashed his headlights, signaling for Owens to pull over. This was a time before everyone had a cell phone at their fingertips, and Quinn needed to locate a pay phone after receiving a page. The conversation he had left him in a state of panic. When he returned to Owens, 10 minutes had passed, and he abruptly canceled their plans before jumping back into his car, visibly shaken as he attempted to. As he drove away, he inadvertently rear-ended Owens' truck. He paused just long enough to utter an apology before speeding off. That was the last time Owen ever laid eyes on Quinn. Later that evening, in the early hours of January 3rd, Owen's luck took a turn for the worse. After parting ways with his frantic friend, Owen found himself in another car crash, but this one was far more severe. He ended up in the hospital with head injuries and a broken rib. Yet, curiously, a police report was never filed regarding the accident. While one friend lay injured, something even stranger unfolded. 2 days after receiving the mysterious page, Quinn called into work to inform them he couldn't make his shift that day. However, the employee who answered the phone was convinced that the voice on the other end wasn't Quinn's. On January 4th, Quinn's mother, Denise Blahakis, officially filed a missing persons report. No one had seen him since that night with Owens, and his family was certain he would never have left them willingly. Thus, the investigation began, and the police. He traced the enigmatic page back to his aunt's house, but she denied ever sending it. In fact, she wasn't even home at the time. She was out having dinner with a friend. Intriguingly, the aunt later filed a police report, claiming her house had been broken into while she was away that night searching for him. The police traced the call to Quinn's workplace, leading them to the Volvo plant where Owens worked. Owens confessed to making the call, but insisted that it was before he vanished. Quinn had requested that he call into work on his behalf, claiming he was unwell. Intriguingly, following this request, Owens ceased all communication with the police, despite being a person of interest due to possibly being the last individual to see Quinn. However, there was no evidence linking him to any wrongdoing, as there was no indication that a crime had even occurred. 2 weeks later, the first significant clue regarding Quinn's disappearance emerged. His car was located parked outside Little Pig's Barbecue, yet there was no trace of Quinn. On the back windshield of the vehicle, a large pair of lips and 2 exclamation points were drawn in lipstick. Strange, right? Well, that's just the beginning of the oddities surrounding the vehicle. Inside, police discovered a live black Labrador puppy that didn't belong to Quinn, along with a plastic hotel key that couldn't be traced to anyone or any hotel. There was also a jacket that wasn't Quinn's, and the driver's seat had been adjusted for someone shorter than him. I know you're curious about what happened to the puppy, but don't worry, it was adopted by one of the investigators. One theory suggested that a girl named Misty Taylor, who had caught his interest, might have inadvertently led Quinn into trouble. Misty was in a relationship with Wesley Smith, who had reportedly threatened Quinn earlier that same day. Later, a couple contacted the police, claiming they had seen someone driving Quinn's vehicle before it was discovered. They provided details that helped create a composite sketch of the suspected driver, which bore a striking resemblance to Misty. However, no evidence ever linked Misty or Wesley to Quinn. Interestingly, it was Misty's mother who was having dinner with Quinn's aunt the night he went missing, and both Misty and Wesley were present. The entire situation is shrouded in questions. Who sent the page? What did Quinn hear on the phone? Did Owens actually get in a car accident, or was something else at play that night? What do the lips on the car signify, and where did the puppy come from? There were no answers. The clues didn't add up to anything and led nowhere. After a few years, Quinn's case went cold, with no suspects and investigators left in the dark. I was unaware of what transpired with Quinn, but years later, in 2015, another case emerged involving the disappearance of Christy Schoen Codd, who was pregnant, along with her husband, J.T. Codd. Their family reported them missing. If the name sounds familiar, Christy was a contestant on the Food Network series Food Network Star. Initially, there was hope that the couple would be found safe at home and that it was merely a misunderstanding. However, when the police arrived, the couple was not there. Strangely, their dogs and essential belongings, including Christy's purse and JT's wallet, were left behind, suggesting they had vanished without a trace. All the neighbors reported that the man living next door to the Codds had been behaving oddly right after the couple vanished. He was seen disposing of bags in a dumpster, which, when retrieved by investigators, contained several items belonging to Christie, including her ID. When police knocked on the door of the house next to the Codds, Robert Jason Owens answered. Owens confessed to breaking into the Codds' home, which is how he came to possess the garbage bags filled with Christie's belongings that he subsequently discarded. He faced charges of breaking and entering and larceny, but the situation took a darker turn when police searched his home. Inside a wood stove, they discovered what seemed to be human remains. This led to charges of 2 counts of first-degree murder and the murder of an unborn child. Further evidence emerged when fire crews responded to a blaze at a mobile home, where additional human remains were found. The property belonged to him. He refrained from providing an explanation to the police regarding the human remains found in his house. However, Owen's wife spoke to investigators, revealing that he had informed her his truck had become stuck in the mud near the Codds' home. JT had permitted him to borrow his car, and it was in this vehicle that he alleged he accidentally hit and killed both of the Codds. Eventually, Owen himself confessed to the killings, though he insisted it was an accident. Regardless, he attempted to dispose of the evidence by removing their bodies, cutting them up and burning them. Owens claimed he didn't want to report the accident because he had been heavily impaired by medications that day. In 2017, Owens officially pled guilty to 3 counts of second-degree murder and 2 counts of dismemberment for the Cobbs' deaths. With Owens' connection to the Cobbs confirmed, investigators had renewed hope that they would finally know what happened to Quinn after he'd been missing for 15 years. One of Owens' family members finally came forward to speak with police. The story they shared was the first real. In January 2000, Owens excavated a pit under the pretense of burning something. He subsequently poured concrete over the site, claiming to his family that he intended to create a fish pond, a project that never materialized. Instead, he later concealed the area with dirt. When police investigated, they discovered fabric, leather materials, and unidentified hard fragments, which were never publicly linked to Quinn. Despite the lack of confirmation, these findings led to Owens being indicted for the first-degree murder of Zeb Quinn. As of 2021, Robert Jason Owens remains a central figure in this case. Awaiting trial, the situation remains shrouded in mystery, particularly regarding the possible motive. With Quinn still unaccounted for, speculation abounds about the truth behind what could be one of the most perplexing unsolved cases. Answers may soon be on the horizon.